forms of reasoning in the Crito, the dialogue that you read for seminar next class. Crito and Socrates are going back and forth about a question, whether Socrates should escape from prison. And Crito is bringing forth a set of arguments that could be called utilitarian, well, I don't really use that word, or pragmatic. In other words, he sees a benefit. There are benefits. So an argument for speeding in that situation would be, you're running late, you got to get to class. There's some benefit from speeding. An argument not to do it would be that you're going to get pulled over. That's a disadvantage. So utilitarian or pragmatic arguments are about the immediate benefits or disadvantages of doing something. What are you going to get out of it? It's a very American way of thinking. Americans tend to be very pragmatic people. But there's a whole other kind of argument that whoever said it was illegal and immoral, that could be called deontological, or I would say an argument from principle. So you've got principles, or you've got values, or you've got ideas about what's right and wrong, just or unjust, that are guiding your action. And often these things come into conflict with each other, don't they? To cheat or not to cheat, right, is often a battle between pragmatic considerations and moral or deontological considerations. So I just kind of wanted to use this as an example of these two forms of reasoning. And the next time you consider a case study, think about trying to argue using both of those forms of reasoning, the utilitarian or pragmatic versus the deontological or arguments from principle. We're going to see both of those in the Crito. Okay. Don't have time for my next activity. Maybe next time.
It's kind of a little different though when you say normal for speed and then running late.
Yes, absolutely. I was thinking of this as a virtue. So for example, the virtue of honesty would lead you, and maybe I should put that in a whole different category, the virtue of honesty would lead you not to lie. The virtue of integrity would lead you not to speed. So there are virtues that you might have inside of you that would impel you to make a certain decision because of who you are. And that is actually a whole other form of moral thinking. So you're right, it is very different. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint here. So Socrates is the originator of what people now call the Socratic method. Well, I don't particularly like it as a form of teaching. But it's the notion that Socrates himself would use questioning to elicit or draw out the knowledge that he believed was already within people. So when you see him in this dialogue or in any other dialogues you read where he's a character, what he's famous for is asking people questions. He was constantly questioning people to get them to think. Socrates and Plato had this idea of what could be called a priori knowledge, this conviction that every human being has within themselves the truth. Within you is a deep knowledge of the truth that's already there. A good teacher will help you to find it or to discover it by asking questions. So teaching isn't telling for Socrates. Teaching is asking people questions and helping them see things. So it's one of the things that he was famous for. We won't have time for this, but maybe in another class, where you guys could sort of write your own Socratic dialogue, or you could do it for extra credit if you want to, model some type of conflict where people on two sides of a disagreement are using questions to argue or persuade each other to a different point of view. Or this could be a nice extra credit post for you guys if you feel like it.
How long would that be though?
Maybe 3 questions and answers. If you're going through your week, if you bump into a conflict with someone and you're using questions to get that person to think about their position, you could use this as an example. Maybe we'll come back to it in seminar. So Socrates lived, this is the one of the few dates I personally memorize, not that many, but 399 BC was when he died. So he lived during a period that's sometimes called the Golden Age of Athens, roughly the 400s to the 200s BC, when the Greek city-state of Athens was kind of at its peak, politically, maybe militarily, maybe economically. His father was pretty much a working class person. His father was really a construction worker, a stonecutter. His mother was a midwife, kind of like a nurse. He was aware of the Mediterranean philosophers. One of the dialogues has him interacting with Parmenides, one of the people we talked about last lecture. So he was aware of their thinking. He was also in the Athenian military when Athens was engaged in the Peloponnesian Wars. They were at war, I think, with the city of Sparta. The two Greek city-states were going at it. And Socrates, and it seems Plato after him, actually ended up being an admirer of the Spartans because of their military discipline. But there are stories that Socrates would march barefoot in the snow. He was like this incredibly tough person. So he was also in the military. He was known for toughness, but obviously not good looks. He was married with children. And the time when we meet him in the dialogues was maybe like the retirement time of his life, when he stopped working and became a sort of wandering teacher in the city of Athens. He'd walk around the city talking to people, and people were drawn to him, people were attracted to him. So we meet him in his retirement age, not in his youth. He could be called a homeless teacher. It could be how he's described. He was constantly having dinner at other people's houses. I've never read any dialogue about him where he was actually in his own house. He's always going to somebody else's house, or somebody is inviting him to come and have dinner with him. One of my students a couple of years ago described him. He died trying to teach his students how to think. I think that's a really lovely description. So he wanted students to question and challenge. He didn't think of teaching as just telling people stuff. Johnny?
You said he died.
He died trying to teach his students how to think.
Think, F-A-K-E?
Think, T-H.
Oh, think?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said
Yeah.
think. That's why I
Thank you. My pronunciation, yeah, stop me if something doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Died trying to teach his students how to think.
Okay.
And not faith. It would be the opposite of faith. He didn't want people to take things on faith and authority. So that's really good contrast. Thank you for asking. Okay. He thought of himself as a gadfly. Like a gadfly is a horsefly. It bites a lazy horse and makes it move. He thought of himself as a gadfly for his society. He was trying to annoy people enough to get them to do something, to sit up and do something.
Think how, like, what he trying to tell them, what questions he asking them?
Right. He would especially question people who were considered to be authorities or respected by the community. So he was constantly questioning authority. Yeah, good. And he ended up pissing off the wrong people. And that was why he was killed. So again, this is the part of the world that we're in. This is us. Across the Atlantic, Spain, North Africa, the Middle East. So we're in this Mediterranean world, and we're in Greece. This little peninsula that's just east of Italy is Greece. So Africa is to the south, Europe's to the north. And then to be specific, the tiny little city of Athens, sort of thought of as a paragon of Greek culture. Socrates saw himself as on a mission from God. The story goes that a priestess called an oracle. The Greeks believed that the god Apollo could speak through certain people. So people would go to this woman called the oracle at Delphi, a place in Greece, and they would ask her for some type of sign or communication from the god, and she'd go into a kind of trance, and then she'd speak. It's kind of like in Harry Potter, the divination teacher. It's that type of thing. So the god would speak through this person. Supposedly the oracle at Delphi said that Socrates was the wisest man in the world. So according to Socrates, when he heard this, he says, that can't be. I'm not wise. So he went on a mission to find someone wiser than himself to prove God wrong.
Really?
So Socrates wanted to prove God wrong. He was even going to argue with God.
He didn't want to be the
Yeah,
wisest.
he says he doesn't want to be, or he doesn't think he is. Socratic humility, we sometimes call this. And one could argue whether he was sincere or not with that. Sometimes we talk about Socratic irony. He was pretending to be dumb. Like those people who go into a pool hall pretending to be bad at pool, and then they beat everybody. It was kind of like that. I think he was sincere.
Well, no, it has it like that if he do want to be. That's like he want to be the wise man. If he's trying to,
I think he was sincere. I think he truly was humble about knowledge and what it is, and he did not think of himself as wise. That's what I personally think. Other scholars disagree, and they say that he was just kind of faking his way through it.
wasn't that his point to be wise on other people?
Well, he's famous for the quote, He only is wise who knows that in truth his wisdom is worth nothing. So to be wise is to be aware of how much you don't know. Did you have a question, Alfonso?
Oh, I was just going to tell you, I don't know if you knew the temple.
The temple at Delphi?
Was actually built over cracks in the earth where the titanium plates were hit. And that's what gave her the misty look and made her hide.
That is awesome. I love stuff like that. I would be interested in learning more about it.
Yeah, that's when people said they go see and see mist and all. It was just basically fumes from the earth coming up this way.
That makes sense, because there are religions that use hallucinogenic drugs to like connect with the spirit world, so I could see that. Priscilla?
Can you say that quote again?
He only is wise, or the only, how can I put this?
You said
The only wise person is the person who knows that in truth, or in reality, his wisdom is worth nothing. Of course, it could be he or she. So the wise person is the person who really is humble about the amount of knowledge that he or she has. We're always learning, right? We never want to think we know everything. That would be a mistake. That was what Socrates was trying to say.
okay.
Yeah. So he went around questioning respected people, politicians, entertainers, businessmen. And he attracted young people who liked to see him putting these older folks on the spot. So people were attracted to him. And he brought about this new style of conversation, teaching through questioning, or the Socratic method. So Socratic method is just something to be aware of what that is. Some people instructors talk about using the Socratic method to teach. It's really just a way of asking rhetorical questions where the teacher already knows the answer and wants the students to figure it out. I don't think that was what Socrates was about. I think his questions were genuine. We'll come back to this video if we have time. One of the things that Socrates often did is he would ask people what they meant by key terms. Maybe we do have time for this. I think it's kind of important. He would ask people what they meant by certain key terms that they used. Watch this clip. It's real short. I'm not being political here. But the president is using a particular term over and over and over again. And if you are one of his listeners, in this case a member of the Central Intelligence Agency, what key term would you want him to explain? You don't have
So
to write.
TaxAct gives me free filing, plus access to last
You
year's
don't have to put
return
it in
and
the
unlimited
journal.
phone support. You know, the
I just have to find the right spot.
That's yours.
What minute did I put on the slide?
Minute 7. Yeah.
107, thank you. We got 15 minutes, guys. I promise we'll get you out of here on time. Even I have to lecture to an empty room and video record it.
The wall behind me is very, very special. We've been touring for quite a while, and I'll tell you, at 29? I can't believe it. Oh, 28. We better reduce it. But that's amazing. And we really appreciate what you've done in terms of showing us something very special. And your whole group, these are really special, amazing people. Very, very few people could do the job you people do. And I want to just let you know, I am so behind you. And I know maybe sometimes you haven't gotten the backing that you've wanted. And you're going to get so much backing. Maybe you're going to say, please don't give us so much backing. Mr. President, please, we don't need that much backing.
If you were a member of the CIA, that's who he's talking to. What key term would you want to know? What does he mean?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by backing? He's promising to give the CIA backing. Well, what is that? That was precisely the kind of question Socrates would ask. He wouldn't take things for granted. He'd listen to people talk, and then he'd ask, well, what do you mean by this? And that is a great kind of question to ask in seminar. As we're engaging around different topics and kind of talking about different things, you might want to think about asking your classmates, well, what do you mean by the soul? Or what do you mean by? Whatever idea it is that you're entertaining. In one of the more famous dialogues called the Meno, Socrates asks a rich man whose house he's having dinner at, what do you mean by virtue? And the guy can't really answer. And that's how the dialogue starts. So, just a little bit more to know about Socrates is some key ideas that he furnished us. The notion of rational argument or dialectic. So an argument is a train of reasoning that connects one idea to another, to another, to another. So if you want to persuade someone about something, so for example, you should come to class. Or no, at the very beginning of class, we're going to have a quiz. Alfonso, why? So I had to explain, I had to make an argument for why I was giving you guys a quiz, right? In order to help you learn the information that you're supposed to learn. Well, why do we need that information? Well, because, and then I better come up with a good answer, right? So a rational argument is a train of reasoning that connects ideas. Or you might ask your coach, why do we have to do a certain drill at practice? And the coach would say, in order to have a particular skill, you need to do this drill. And in order to do this drill, you have to learn something else. So it's a way of connecting one idea with another with another. And that's what argument or dialectic is. And you'll see that in the reading. So the importance of ideas, Socrates believed or thought that ideas are real. Things like love, truth, beauty, goodness, justice. Justice is what you're going to see in the reading. Principles of right and wrong. He was convinced that those things have a reality of their own and they should guide our lives. Not everyone thinks that. He emphasized the importance of virtue or moral goodness, justice, and the good. So those were ideas he was interested in exploring. Some of his most cherished convictions were, it's better to suffer injustice than to do it. Real injury is injury to the soul. You're going to see that in the Crito, and it's a little bit hard to interpret. But he compares the body with the soul, and he talks about the health of the body, and really he's talking about sports and how we train the body, but he's using that as an analogy for training the soul, and he's saying, you wouldn't do something that harms your body. Why would you want to do something that harms your soul? So he's trying to talk about that. So real injury is injury to the soul. No one ever does wrong intentionally. Evil is just ignorance. Socrates thought if you know what's good, you're going to do it. And the people who do wrong things really just don't know any better. So he had a very positive outlook on human nature. Nobody ever does evil intentionally. Integrity was important to him. He was also famous for the quote, know thyself, or know yourself. So that woman at the very beginning, she was like, well, I haven't thought about myself this way. That's, Socrates would say, no, you need to think about yourself and know who you are. The importance of community and civil society. He loved his city-state of Athens, and that comes through in the reading. And then, of course, the idea that there's more to life than pleasure. This painting, which is rather famous, shows Socrates is here. And this is one of his young friends, one of the people who hung around with him, named Alcibiades. Alcibiades was just having a lot of fun in bed with these three ladies. And then here's the wine down there and some food. So food, drink, and sex, all the things that are most pleasing, right? We talked about pleasure. And Socrates is dragging him away from that and trying to pull him into the light and the air. And even his arm is sort of pointing outward toward the sky. He's trying to pull him away from physical pleasures and saying there's more to life than that. Moral goodness and ideas and justice and truth and learning. So that was one of his basic convictions. So Socrates pissed off the wrong people, and they were upset. He ended up arrested on charges of corrupting the youth, which I think some of you talked about in your reading session. So he was accused of damaging the lives of young people with his teachings. He was also accused, I think, of either atheism or disrespecting the gods. He was a religious person, but just not religious in the way his community expected him to be. So he was arrested and stood trial and was executed in 399 BC. I'm not sure why historians think that he was 70. I'm not sure what the evidence for that is, but that's what I've read. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by drinking hemlock, which was the ancient world's version of lethal injection. So in our reading, we meet him just before his execution. Oh, yes. In our reading called the Crito, the reading is actually a writing that was done by Plato, one of his friends and students. Socrates himself didn't write very much, maybe a little bit of poetry, but we don't have it anymore. All that we know about him comes from other people, primarily Plato, who wrote about Socrates as a character in these readings called dialogues. So the dialogues take the form of a back and forth conversation between Socrates and other people. So we're hearing about Socrates through Plato. So Socrates is in prison. It's early in the morning. Socrates' execution is going to happen soon. And one of his friends, who happens to be very wealthy, comes with an offer of busting him out of prison. If you've already started reading the dialogue, you figured that out already. So this is the conversation that they have. So as you read, look at the arguments Crito makes for Socrates to leave prison. Socrates almost begs Crito, please persuade me. I want to be persuaded to leave, but I don't think I should, and here's why. So think about the arguments on both sides of the question, the arguments Crito makes, and then how Socrates responds to them. The very end of the dialogue is a lengthy speech in which Socrates is kind of personifying the laws of the city. So just be aware of that as you read the end of the dialogue. It's a more dense, it's just Socrates talking, but he's talking as if as if the laws were in a dialogue with him. So he's talking to the laws of the city, he's personifying them, and they're asking him questions. So just be aware that the end of it is a slightly different kind of imaginary dialogue. Any questions before we take off? Deontay?
You said he's personifying the laws of Athens.
Yes.
Who is he talking to?
The laws. Now this is interesting because it's starting to get us into Plato's idealism. So he's thinking of the laws of the city as beings that he can talk to. I'm trying to think of an analogy.
Kind of like the laws. I'm just thinking of it like this, like if, you know, like in Beauty and the Beast, the plates and the dress
Yes,
of life.
that is perfect. If the laws could speak, here's what they'd say. I mean, that's great. You take something and personify it, but this is something abstract. And that's important because in Plato's philosophy, abstractions are real. So the laws aren't something you can see or touch or smell or taste, right? The laws of our community, they might be written on paper, but laws are ideas. And so Socrates is kind of imagining, if the laws could talk to me, what would they say? Does that that help a little?
Yeah, absolutely. We was trying to figure that out when we were doing the video.
I look forward to listening to the end of your tape, like I'm about to through it. And if you guys have questions about stuff and I give them on the tape, I'll try to come up with answers. That's good. Okay.
We do that, table stuff next week?
Yeah, there's more packets on the head table by the door for the reading. And again, if you lose your reading, you can always get it off of Blackboard, just print it out.
When we do that recording stuff next week? Next Thursday?
So we'd be
So
on
you'll be doing the reading session. And Miss Frank from the Library Tutoring Center, she's hoping to be able to come and kind of do a workshop for it on the reading and help you annotate it. So hopefully you'll have that with you for a little while.
So like, if there's a
It's always nice. You know what, here's what you can do. If you want to burn your one excused tardy, the two of you could make it up. You get one excused tardy on the semester, but I would have to write a whole other quiz for you. So if you decide you want to do that, let's do it on the next lecture day, and you can come a little early. Or what I could do, come a little early to class the next lecture day, and I'll give you 2 quizzes. So but you have to decide if you want to burn that excuse tardy or not. It's up to you guys. Just let me know.
Can I do an assignment that might be relevant?
Nope.
To when is group quiz next summer?
I think so, but when I look at the schedule.
Can I do an essay? No?
Nope. Yeah, next Thursday, February 2nd.
Okay.
Okay, awesome.
So next Tuesday we have the reading?
Correct.
All right, thanks.
Are we in that same room?
Hopefully, unless it's occupied. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We were supposed to have it,
Okay.
but it should be okay.
Oh,
Thank you. Turn off that camcorder. Need help?
I'm okay.
better than.